All right, 3 minutes after the top of the hour. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, you remember him, right? Finally set to visit East Palestine, Ohio, today, nearly 3 weeks after the toxic train derailment.
But residents in the Ohio town who are worried about their health say it's too little too late.
Aisha Hasni is live at the White House with the latest. And Aisha, today we've learned that if you interview him when you're walking, he might take a picture of you.
Hey, good morning, Steve. Brian Ainsley. Yes, that's right. And he might actually talk to you a little bit about this upcoming trip, although we still haven't gotten any details from his office about the trip that's supposedly supposed to happen today. Although you are right, it comes about 20 days after the disaster in East Palestine. And if you want to talk about the timing with Pete Buttigieg, well, you might have to hold your breath. Here's a tweet that he fired off last night about the timing. He says, happy to discuss timing of our Ohio visit, but starting to think some in Washington want that to be the main focus so that there aren't too many questions about rail safety regulation, who is for and who is against. So that's his take. Now, Buttigieg, as you know, has been under intense scrutiny for his response. He's going to be meeting with officials and getting an update from the NTSB today. He says he wants his visit to be about getting Congress to take actions on rail safety, but not everyone in town, guys, is impressed by his delayed visit.
They don't care. They always say they care about the unforgotten, you know, the little guy. They don't care.
When they care about the people is when they're on TV. That's when they care about us. When it comes to real solutions and real problems, they're nowhere to be found.
Oh, way too late.
Yeah, way too late.
He might show up, but it's too late.
So former President Trump actually beat Buttigieg to the punch, touching down in Ohio yesterday, bringing bottled water and McDonald's for first responders.
Nice to meet you.
Hello, everybody. That's a nice, beautiful looking group of people. So I know this menu better than you do, okay? I probably know it better than anybody in here. We're going to take care of the fire department.
Okay.
We're going to take care of the police department.
Guys, we have yet to hear of any possible visit by President Biden, although he did make a call to Ohio on Tuesday while he was sitting thousands of miles away in Poland. He says he wanted to let residents know he's got their back. Now, East Palestine Mayor Trent Conaway, who actually does not want Buttigieg to come at all, he doesn't want the media circus around that visit. He told Hannity last night he's 100% focused on his residents.
A lot of our residents have moved back in, and I'm genuinely concerned about their concerns. They tell us the water's safe. It's safe to go back to your home, but yet there's people getting rashes, and I mean, they're nervous. So I really feel for our residents.
So again, as far as details on the trip today, we still haven't received any. We'll share them with you as soon as we know it. But as for timing, Pete Buttigieg, Secretary Buttigieg, may not want to talk about it, but we do know it may be coming because the EPA has now moved out of the emergency response phase into a more long-term investigation phase.
That's
Guys?
right. Thank you very much, Aisha. That's right. And now they've tapped into Superfund money going forward to try to make things better. But, you know, about a half an hour ago, we spoke to a husband and wife, and they own a greenhouse there. They raise vegetables. They raise herbs. They've got an ice cream shop. Nobody's shopping there. Nobody wants to go there. And they don't know whether or not they will be compensated like you would be with business interruption, because they're not making any money because of all the publicity, rightly so, about what could be in the water or the air.
Maybe they could find some money in the government, like the COVID money. Remember when all these businesses are closing down?
Well, that would have to be authorized by the federal government and Congress.
Well, when President Trump was there yesterday, he delivered pallets of water. I think
Trump
13
water.
pallets. Yeah, it was Trump spring water. And in each pallet, several thousand bottles of water. And he also went to McDonald's, as we saw in that video that Aisha was talking about, to feed the first responders, like the fire department and the police officers and some of the residents there.
Yeah, here is, so he was there, J.D. Vance was there. Senator Brown did not show up on this day, nor did Governor DeWine, curiously. Here's what J.D. Vance said these people need.
I think there's certainly a day late and a dollar short, but there is a lot that they can do to make up for this and to ensure that East Palestine isn't forgotten into the future. Look, Sean, the devastation in this community. You're going to have some people staying, but some people trying to leave. You're going to have some businesses that have been destroyed by this, not through any fault of their own, not because they failed to sell a good product, but because of this disaster and the effect that it's had on the community. So we're going to have to take care of this community. We're going to have to ensure that what happened at the train crash almost 3 weeks ago doesn't destroy this town. And like the mayor said, we're going to have to stay on top of federal officials and Norfolk Southern to make sure that people are safe. I think those are all of the important things that we have to do. I'm certainly going to stay on top of it. I know a lot of people are as well.
The one thing I would say is I knew nothing about these derailment numbers. I'm stunned by it. That we have thousands of derailments all the time, and how costly it is, and how they're not kept up, and maybe the regulation needs to be there. I think there needs to be, there's a widespread sentiment to have a look at the whole rail industry, what the lobbyists are doing, and what the actual, I heard there were 3 people on that train of how many cars? 20 of which had chemicals in it?
Somebody at the front, somebody at the back, and
does that
some
blow
other
you
people.
away? I mean, I know nothing about the business. I'm more than transparent about that. But I just think we got to look at this. And as Governor DeWine said, I had no idea this toxic chemicals were coming through these towns. Yeah. At least we should be alerted to it. I think that's a reasonable request.
Well, and Pete Buttigieg even said we have thousands of these train derailments quite often, and that is alarming. This could happen to your town.
Yeah, listen, we mentioned when I was a reporter back in the day, I used to go to train derailments in Kansas all the time. They oftentimes just were carting wheat to market and not poisonous chemicals, but they can also update, the systems, how the trains stop, how the trains go. All that stuff could be updated. Ultimately, the Biden administration is really taking it on the chin because of a lot of people are furious, and there's been a talking point where, he goes abroad, but he doesn't come here. There was an item in Politico that said that it is rare for instance, a transportation secretary to go to a derailment. During the Trump administration, apparently, even when there were derailments, Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao never visited the sites. But what is different about that and this
poison gas.
People just don't trust the government tests because they go, well, it's okay to trust, you can drink the water, you can breathe the air. People don't trust the tests. And so by virtue of government officials showing up, breathing the air, drinking the water, then it looks better. But for them to say, look, they didn't do it at that time, it's just one of those things.
But there was nothing that equated. There's nothing that equated to this during the Trump administration. And one thing about Donald Trump, and there were toxic gases that poisoned the town.
There were some fatality derailments where people lost their lives during the Trump administration. Nobody lost their life during this.
Right, but this is just can destroy a town. So this is the easiest thing to do to show up, and they have chosen not to show up. And anybody who thinks it was a good move not to show up, you don't have to shelve Munich or Warsaw. There's nothing to do with it. You go when it happened February 3rd. You have 10, 15 days to go before you had to go anywhere else. Yeah. You ignored it. He's got terrible staff. They're tone deaf on this, and the transportation secretary couldn't look more inept. I hope he gets an earful today.
That's what Governor Sununu was saying. He said, look, he should have gone on day 1.
Yeah.
And so,
It would just be terrible if the government didn't send people because they were afraid of the air.
Or that they're Republican.
Oh, I see. They didn't want to breathe it in. So they're saying, we don't want to go. They can breathe in the air, but we're not going to.
Let's don't send the president. He's 80, and he shouldn't breathe that air. We don't know that that's true, but that would be terrible.
Well, that would be worse than actually I was thinking is that 70% of those people voted for Trump, and it's a Republican state by 8. We don't have to go. We're not going to win it anyway. That's worse. But what you described, Steve, would be even worse than that.
Yep.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.